All right. I always love these conversations because it's literally office manager dentists sitting down together, chewing on the real stuff. So, Dr. Wu, Greg, thank you back to the Mango channel. I'm glad that you're here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm actually in my house this time finally. I'm usually traveling, so yeah.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that. We're both home. This is
Yeah,
this is a weird thing. So every time we talk, when we finish our conversation, we think of what the next subject is going to be. So last time we filmed, we said this time was going to be inter office communication or inter team communication. I'm interested in hearing from you because when we started this, you said there's three areas that you could really think of us talking about. So I'm going to hand it over to you. What are the 3 areas? And then we can kinda dive into each one of them about what you do in your office and best practices that I would suggest.
right. So, I mean, obviously, there's the communication from us to our patients
Mhm.
verbally. If I say, "Hey, Laura, don't touch that," or "Hey, can you help me with steri?" So there's the verbal communication, but then there's also nonverbal communication. So if I'm in an office, number 2, and Laura, you're coming to get me while I'm working on a patient, you're not going to say, "Hey, Greg, you know that room over there? That patient really needs to see you while I'm treating a patient." We need to figure out ways to do nonverbal communication as well, be it sticky notes the old school way, or there's actually softwares out there that can have big blinking lights, or they have virtual intercom where they can actually ping up doctor with a sound and you're like, oh, okay, I'm needing hygiene too. And then there's communication amongst the team, inter-office communication, in the sense that depending on how large your office is, you may need to communicate with your assistants, your doctors that are not physically there, especially doctors. For those that work with specialists that aren't in the office, you have to find ways to communicate. And one of the things that we talked about last time was tone. It's easy to get tone when you're verbally communicating with someone in person or on the phone, but when you read text, it's hard to sometimes read sarcasm or a happy tone or angry tone. Of course, nowadays we have emojis, so sometimes I always put smiley face emojis so things don't get
Alright.
misinterpreted. Right? So, I mean, I will take it to you, Laura, as an office manager. I'm sure you had to write emails or letters to your team, and
Right.
sometimes you might have a team member says like, "Oh my god, Laura was really rude to us about that." And maybe you were reminding people, "Hey, don't forget to do whatever." Right?
Right. Well, let's start with verbal, because let's do it in by category. So verbal communication, one of the things that we just assume when we hire employees and people that everybody knows how to communicate well. And I always talk about this, like answering phones. Do you know how to answer the phones? Yes, I know how to answer the phone. Hi, can I help you? That's very different than a dental office phone. Do you know how to answer the phones for our office? Technically, we all know how to communicate, but do we know how to communicate well with our patients, with each other, with our doctors? And so leaning in on making sure that we're training our team members well on how to communicate, what to say to patients, what not to say to patients, how to talk to each other. So talk to me a little bit about your office. And I mean, these are like the soft skills
Right.
that we just assume people walk in and know how to do, but especially nowadays with this younger generation, maybe they're not as trained in that. So talk to me about your practice and how you guys handle that and what you do to help with that.
Right. So, well, the first thing is smile. I know this sounds weird because you're on the phone, but you can tell someone's tone if they're smiling and they're happy and upbeat. Nobody wants to talk to someone miserable. It's like, hey, welcome, hold, please. Right. It's like, hi, welcome to Emerson Dental. How can I help you? This is Dr. Wu. Right. And something simple. Keep it
I'm
simple.
gonna I'm gonna jump in right here because I
Please.
had a whole article. You got me excited. I got a whole article about this years ago. Take this out of dental office for a minute. Just take it to like I travel, you travel all the time. We talked about this before. When people say the right things, they say what they're supposed to say, but
Mhm.
then they don't say it in a way. So you just said smile. That's a nonverbal way to make your verbal sound better, right? Like if you smile, people can hear that when you're talking. And there's so many people who will say the right thing. Like I'll have a flight attendant or somebody checking me into a flight or a hotel who are saying technically what was told by the hotel or the airport airlines to say, but you can tell their attitude doesn't match what they say.
Yeah.
So it's like one thing to teach our team members to say something, but it's a whole nother thing to like tie that to do they really mean it? So that made me think about that too, because I have people all the time, they're like, "Can I help you? Welcome to the hotel. I'm so excited you're here." And it's like, you're not really excited, but they're saying what they were told to say.
And I'm glad that you bring that up, Laura. One of the things I tell doctors all the time is, because you're so busy with your clinic and running your practice, have you ever taken the time to audit your office? And when I say that, it's like, have you ever walked into your office as a patient and you look to see what's dirty? What does a patient see? Is the room clean? How are they greeted? That's the physical part. Have you ever called your office and listened to how your phones are being answered? Because that's equally, and as we're talking about answering phones, one of the things, since you travel a lot and I travel a lot, is I hate being put on hold. I don't know how you
Mhm,
feel. And so
mhm.
one of the things I tell people is, that work in my office, before you put them on hold, ask them if it's okay. "Hey, Laura, thank you for calling. Do you mind if I put you on hold?" If you said no, I would understand. Actually, I'm in the middle of something. Can I just call you back, or can you call me back when you guys are free?" No problem. Because for me, I hate when they say, "Hold, please," and I'm like, "No, no, don't put me on hold," because I'm usually juggling 3 different balls, and I'd rather you just call me back or I call you back at a different time.
Uh-huh.
So,
Or use
that's
an
my
AI
little.
reception.
Yeah, exactly,
Right?
or you have AI receptionists. For me, my time is valuable, and I know your time is valuable, and me being on hold, it just kills my day, so
For sure. So we were just talking, let's go back to the verbal because you and I could do squirrel, squirrel.
I know, sorry.
No, no, it's good. So what we say and how we say it matters. And one of the things that I saw in my practice early on is the words that we were saying made a difference on things like, let's just get you scheduled, or oh, I understand that's a lot of money, that's expensive, or just like some of those words that we use. One of the things I found was when we'd say, let's just get you scheduled, the patient were like, well, let me just call you, and they would leave because just minimizes the
Yeah.
importance of it. So what are some words that you use, don't use, tell your team to use in the practice, emphasize or not? Because what we say does matter.
Well, one of the things I always say is, "Hey, treat every customer like VIP. Be excited to see them. Like, 'Hey, Laura, it's great to hear from you. Welcome to the practice. What can I help you with?'" And more so is just, we talked earlier on one of the episodes about servant leadership, right? So equally, whoever's answering the phone, it's your servant phone call. It's like, "Hey, I'm here to help you. I'm interested in knowing." And if I can't understand you, one of the things, or if you're getting angry, I'd say, "Laura, let me hear this correctly." And I repeat what you say. I may not agree with what you're saying. I just said, "Let me repeat what you said about your complaint." That's one of the biggest tips, because let's face it, I mean, I've never done the front desk job, with the minus the occasional I had to answer a phone call, but let's be honest, and I know this is true. When a doctor answers a phone call, they get a different reaction than your front desk, because the patients that call tend to sometimes be a little bit more abrupt and a little bit rude. But if it's a doctor, they're like, "Oh no, hey, how's it going?"
That's across the board, right? They're super sweet to the doctors, but we get the brunt of it. So,
Right,
yes.
and so I do hear and I do listen, even though, and my staff knows it, my patients may not, but I do listen to the calls, and one of the great things about Mango is all the calls are recorded, so I can hear everything. When there's a disagreement or something that's gonna get heated, I always say, "Don't don't go against it, just acknowledge that you heard what they said." That's my
Mhm.
biggest tip out there.
Yep.
It's like,
Because
"Hey,
it's their
Laura."
version. It's not
Yeah,
that you're saying they're right or wrong. It's just let them be heard.
and I would say, "Hey, Laura, I understand that you're upset that we're running late. Can I just verbally say what you just said, just so I can make sure I have this documented correctly? You're upset that we didn't see you on time on Tuesday because we had a very jam-packed schedule, and we did not meet your expectation, correct?" And that's it. And you may be like, "Oh my God, my kids and this," and I mean, everybody deals with stress. And sometimes in the heat of a moment, you have to, I mean, it's not right, but people will lash out on people.
Right. Right, for sure. Okay, so working through how things should be said is super important, making sure you're using the right words. But then you thinking about inter-office communication and team communication, there's nonverbal skills and or the nonverbal side of things. And so I'm going to talk about it two sides. First is your nonverbal speaks louder than your verbal. So you can say the right things all day long, but if you're rolling your eyes or sighing, that's going to override that. And then we'll talk about, you were talking about nonverbal, like when the doctor's with the patient. So let's talk about the nonverbal overriding the verbal, like how, we have a lot of issues sometimes in dental offices. We have stressful days. We have you know, employees that were up last night tired because their kids were sick and they come in with an attitude. So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts and how do you work with that with your team when there's some nonverbal going around?
Yeah. That's always tough because you're right. We live in the real world. We live life, right? And so morning meeting, I'll often say, "Hey, who's not having a great day?" Just before the patients come in, because when the patients come in, it's showtime, right? So let's say, and if someone says like, "Hey, Laura, I'm not having a great day. My kids, so can you bear with me?" Then I get some compassion out of you, right? Versus
Yep.
if I never said anything and Laura, you call on me and you're like, "Hey, we're running behind the stereo." I'm like, "Well, tell them to work harder and to work faster because I don't have time to
Yeah.
deal with this." Right?
Yeah.
But if then you may say like, "Yeah, I know you didn't have a great morning. Let's just, take a step back and just we all know that, whatever happened. Maybe my
Well,
dog."
honestly, because if you don't do it that way, that's the proactive way. I'm all about proactivity, right? Like being proactive. If not, then what's going to happen is if you're kind of short because you're tired because your kid was up sick, I'm going to go over here and whisper to somebody else about, did you see Greg today? Like he's got an attitude versus, hey, we're a team. We're going to gather around you. We're going to hold you up today, right? Now you can't come in every day with an attitude and be tired and we're all holding you up. But once in a while, that's what a team is for, right?
Right, because if it's repetitive, then, Laura, unfortunately, you and I have to have some difficult conversations
Hmm.
of what this is acceptable and what's not acceptable. But we're all human. We're all gonna have bad days and we're gonna have mishaps. So the more leniency we can give each other, it will help us become a better team and effectively communicate with each other. Hey, you got my back if I got a bad day. I got your back if you got a bad day.
So I tell this story when I speak. I worked for a dentist once that he had this beautiful office. It was an old bank, and there was a check in and check out desk at the front, a rounded front desk, and everything was great. But the front desk had this wall built in the middle of it. It didn't make sense. Like it wasn't supposed to be there. It was after the fact. You could tell. And I said, "What's the deal with the wall?" And they said, "Oh, that's because the lady that used to work there and the lady that sat at that desk didn't get along. So the dentist built a wall between them so they didn't have to see each other." So I tell that story because, I mean, there's probably some dentists who are like, yeah, that makes sense. But they didn't teach you in dental school how to deal with the team drama or the nonverbal attitudes and stuff. And some dentists tend to bury their head in the sand and just ignore it and wish it would go away. So I'm going to ask you as a dentist, how do you handle it? What do you do? Like, do you ignore it? Do you jump in? I mean, because you've had to over the years had some issues with your team.
And I'm gonna raise my hand and say I'm guilty. When I first early in my career, I dodged a lot of it. I'm like, I don't want to get involved in this. And so much like a lot of you doctors out there, I took a lot of CE courses. Now, most of you probably take clinical CE courses. But I soon realized some of my weakness was how to manage people. And I started saying, like, I need to start learning how to communicate. And I took some communication courses. And the best thing I learned from these communication courses is it is difficult to have these conversations. And so just acknowledge that. Like I said earlier, if I said, you know what, Laura, I have to have a difficult conversation. This isn't easy for me, but I'm just going to go out and say that. And I always preface that. Hey, Laura, I have to have a difficult conversation. I found that to be the most effective way to have those conversations. It at least acknowledges like, look, it's not easy for me. It's not going to be easy for you, but we're having some conflict here. Can we agree upon that? You may not agree with my answer or my solution, but you can at least agree with me. This is not a fun conversation for both of us.
Yeah. I love that you say that because I always high five all the dentists who come into my session when there's clinical CE going down, down the hall, but they come into one of my like team building, customer service, verbal skills, difficult discussions because you're all great dentists and you get all the clinical C, but it's the leadership part of things that's hard, right? It's the you have to be okay to have the difficult discussions. You have to be okay to lead this group of humans towards a certain direction, and it does take leadership and communication skills for that.
And Laura, you've been around enough, and I've been to lots of different conferences, and I've met tons of different dentists. And I've met dentists that are very successful that, have a huge following of patients and people. And then others that are just, they're really detailed, but they have smaller practices. And through the years, what I've observed is the best dentist, clinically sound, isn't always the busiest dentist. And what I've learned is that their ability to connect with people and communicate effectively actually is a direct correlation on how successful they are within their practice. Again, like I said, early on in my career, you know, I worked for a dentist, he was an impeccable dentist, clinically sound, but he wasn't a great communicator. He bought the practice from a dentist that was very boisterous and a great communicator. Let's say that his dentistry was less than stellar, but it racked his brain. He's like, I'm a better dentist than this guy, but he's busier and I do great work, but he's got like 3 columns going and I just have my one. And I turned to him and I said, "You know what the difference is? He knows how to communicate with people." I said that to him. I said, "You're not gonna like what I'm gonna say to you." I said, "Hands down, your dentistry is better. If you want me to say it, I'll say it for you." But he has a much better way of communicating with people, not just patients, but his team. His staff adore him. He was very direct. He wasn't rude. He was a true leader, and working in that practice taught me a lot. And I still wanted to be a good dentist, don't get me wrong, but I was like, "Man, I have to learn this because this guy's amazing."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things is to be a leader, you have to have followers. So, in order to have followers, you gotta communicate. I always tell dentists that, if you build the right team around you, you can have a team of leaders also. Like, you can have a great office manager, great team leads, great but they need a direction. They need somebody in the driver's seat. And I always tell dentists, like, whatever you're thinking, if you think you've told the team, tell them 3 times as much because so many times we feel like we have to pull it out of your brain, like, "Where are we going? What are we doing? How should we handle this?" Like, not the little stuff, but, like, the big stuff so that we can go do the work to succeed at what the dentist wants to build.
And I'm glad that you bring that up because, I'm sure that you had this. You work together with someone so long, you don't need to verbally communicate. It becomes like second nature. Like, I know what Laura's thinking, or Laura, you know what I'm thinking, right? As soon as you see something, like we finish each other's sentences. That's where we want to get to. It goes to that whole when you build a team, there's forming, norming, and performing. Every dentist wants to be performing. Like, I just wanna come in the room, you know everything I want, you just set it up, I don't even have to say anything, right? That's or as in a sports analogy, the no look pass. I just wanna go in there, pass the ball, and we're just gonna score.
Right.
Everybody wants to get to performing, but they don't realize that they have to take the steps of forming, storming, which is this what you were talking about. Storming is the thing that most dentists avoid because 'cause they're like, "Oh my
Mhm,
god, there's conflict, we gotta abort." But you
mhm,
need to storm. Storm doesn't mean you're arguing and fist fighting. It means like, hey, we have a little bit of disagreement. Can we talk this out so we can figure out where each other's minds are at? And then norming. Norming's where like, okay, well, I know Laura doesn't love doing recordings at early in the morning because she's on West Coast time. So,
right,
that's why we do them later in the afternoon so that, she's
right.
awake. I'm not as frazzled. So
Yep. I actually when I was filming for Front Office Rocks, when I was designing Front Office Rocks training videos, one of the videos that came out of that was from the office about dental assistants, and the video is something like top 20 things that annoy your dentist. And the reason I made that video is because our 3 doctors all shared an office together, and I went in multiple times, and I heard the 3 doctors at one point or another complaining about their dental assistants. They didn't have this ready, they didn't do that right, she had to go pick this up or whatever. And so they were talking about it. I said, "Well, did you talk to your dental assistants about it?" And they were like, "No, no, 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 no." And I'm like, "So you're complaining to each other, but you're not actually talking to the assistant about it because they didn't wanna have that storming conversation about, like, 'I really need you to have this ready.'" Like, how are they supposed to know to get better if you don't tell them, right? So it makes me think about that, like, where dentists really they're not good at that, so they avoid it, but then they wanna get to a point where they can walk into a room and everything's set up for them.
I'm gonna speak up from my own colleagues. We're not taught these things. I mean, these are things that we are just thrown in and be like, okay, graduated dental school, here's an office and here's your assistant. And okay, you're ready to communicate. You got to learn it's difficult, right?
Right. Right, exactly. Okay, great. So now let's talk about the third part of communication, which is the team communication. So you have 2 offices and you have a team of how many?
About 26 employees between two locations. Yeah.
Okay, so
So
back in the day, it was you and a couple people could sit down in the kitchen and talk about stuff, but now it's much bigger. So talk to me about what you guys do, what you did when you were smaller, what you do now, and then even, what you've seen out there that other offices do or you've seen when you go to these conferences that are great solutions of keeping the team, connected and communicating with them.
right. So, when the team was small, it was much easier, right? I had one to two assistants, two hygienists, a front desk. And so our staff meetings were easy. The morning meetings were easy. Although at the time, truth be told, I thought it was hard. You don't know what you don't know, right? As you get bigger, you're like, oh man, things were so much easier back then. I,
Uh-huh.
I, I guess I should say, even like from my history, like, I look back at dental school. I'm like, life was easier when I was in dental school. Life was easier back when I was in high school and in college. I didn't have to worry about paying bills and life was easy when I was 7 years old, right? I only had to worry about, what I was gonna have for breakfast.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
So what do you do for 'em now that you got this big team?
Now when you got a big team, then, what I learned the hard way is put it in writing because I would verbally say something and they're like, "You said this." I'm like, "I did?" I'm like, "You know what? From now on, I say a lot of things. If I do not put it in writing for you guys, it didn't happen." Equally, both directions. So please send me an email, you know, WhatsApp chats, or, if you use Slack. I mean, there's different methods, but I
Mhm.
have different groups. In my office, we use WhatsApp. So we have an assistant group. We have a front desk group. We have a doctor group. We have one location group. That way, there's messages going through like, hey, you know what? I'm running late. I got stuck in traffic. They just send a quick message. That way, everybody in that office knows you're running late. If it's a hygiene thing, hey, you know what? The piezo tips are really worn out. And we need someone to like look into ordering these. We have a supply group. I mean, when you get bigger, you have to have these different channels. I personally like Slack better because there's different channels you can create, but we fell into WhatsApp because it just was easier for my team to like use because it's like text. When I did the Slack, it was like some people had a hard time understanding how the channels work, and I'm like, you know what, forget it, guys. Let's keep it simple.
We actually talked about that in a past interview where you were saying, like, you gotta get the team on board to use the software, to pick the software that's gonna work. If they don't use it, it's not they're not gonna use it to communicate.
And it's fun, and it's interesting you bring that up. For those of you who have multiple, like 8, 10 chair operatories, I use something called a virtual intercom. I mean, there's so many different programs out there. There's like, Blue Note, and, obviously your practice management software has ones. But I actually like virtual intercom because it's very simple. It's just a little bar. You say, hey, Dr. Wu to op two, Dr. Wu to op three, like I said, and it just makes a little ping sound. And again, that's another one that was like, I had other ones I looked at, but at the end of the day, my team liked it. They just said, this is simple. It does what we need it to do. It tells you where you're supposed to be. It tells us where we're supposed to be. It allows us to, if air traffic control, direct things so that there's no log jam. Because when you have
Uh-huh.
multiple doctors and you have multiple hygienists, they don't know which doctor to call to their room. So that's where
Yeah.
that's really effective.
I don't know if I told you this or not, but one of the things that we did, we were in a smaller office where you could see like everywhere in the office. Then we moved to a big 8 operatory office with 2 different halls and stuff. And so for the first week we were in this new office, I felt like I was trying to find people the whole time. I was like, this is not going to work. And people, for me, you can communicate to computer, but the issue is if you're not sitting at a computer, then you don't know. where they are to find them. So we ended up doing headsets with a walkie-talkie, which I have learned it takes with all of this, you've gotta have systems in place and you gotta train the team on how to use it. But we had headsets that everybody wore except for the doctors, and we communicated amongst each other with the headsets, like, "We're ready for an exam," or "Your patient's here," or "I'm walking a patient out." And the one thing it did for us, which I really liked, was it brought instead of having it be clinical and front office or doctors and hygiene wing, we all operated as like kind of one brain. The thing about it is we had to really teach our team what do we talk about on the headsets and what do we not say on the headsets because it can be very distracting if you have a patient in front of you and there's a lot of talking going on in your ear. But it really did help us to kind of maneuver the whole practice better as like one big team. I don't know if you've ever thought about that or seen that. There are a lot of people who've tried headsets and they say, "Never, I could never do it." Then you definitely with all communication, you have to implement it the right way.
It's funny you bring that up. Um, I did look into it. I shied away from it, and you can please I want you to chime in on this. I was afraid that someone was not gonna turn off the intercom and some inappropriate things would be said, 'cause and then it would just create things that people shouldn't say and they can't take back.
Well,
So
there's that's a whole nother session. Maybe we talk about that the next time of what should or shouldn't be said in the office. But, we had to learn one of the things we had the first week we used them, then we sat down and we wrote some rules around it. Like we had to limit what our conversations were. You couldn't have long-term because everybody's listening and you're interrupting everybody's wherever they
right.
are.
You understand what I'm getting at? I was like,
Yeah, you had but
I thought of
I'll
all
tell
the I thought of all the things that could go wrong. That's why I was like, I don't know if I wanna go down this road."
Right? Well, I'll tell you, when we first so what we used to do in our practice is when we used to use interoffice messaging until we went to the headsets, and what we used to say is when the doctor was ready to come do an exam, the hygienist would send a message that would say, "The patient in I'm ready for an exam, the patient's hot or the patient's cold." And what that meant was the patient has treatment that you're gonna have to come in and talk to them about, or they're interested in something, or they don't have anything, you don't have to worry about it, right? So when the doctor was trying to decide which exam to go to, maybe he would go to a fast one first, get that one done so the hygienist could be done, and then go to the one that was going to take longer. Well, then we moved to headsets, and our patient was in the operatory, and the hygienist, when we had the headset, she said, "We're ready in op one for an exam. Our patient's hot." And the guy turned around and he goes, "Did you say I'm hot?" And we were like, and so we had to change it was ready 5 or ready 10. So what that meant is we say we're ready for an exam 5 or 10. 5 means fast exam, 10 means longer exam because of that. Like the patient's like, "Did you just call me hot?" And we were like, so yeah, so there is some tweaking that you have to do, but
Yeah,
literally there shouldn't be anything said on the headsets that the patients can't
and out
hear
of
or
curiosity, for my knowledge, what did you do if, like, let's say the doctor's in the middle of treatment, they're doing their filling or their cram prep, and their hygienist ready? Would you just wait till the doctor's finished, or do you have a way to effectively communicate? That's kinda
do you
why I
know
like
what?
my
Let's
virtual intercom, it makes a sound. It makes a
yeah,
sound, so I'm like, while I'm working, I hear the sound, and I look, and I'm like, "Okay, I gotta wrap up or find a little break." So
uh
that's why I like the sound rather than the headset, because I don't want somebody to interrupt and say,
let's
"Hey,
do
room
that on
here."
our next let's do that because that's a whole topic we could talk about.
Okay.
We weren't gonna go clinical, but you just got me excited about clinical.
I know.
Not so
It's
much
me
about
and you.
clinical, but the flow of the hygiene exam and how that works for the communication. Because I do think it's gonna take me 10 minutes to explain to you how we did that in our practice and how it worked, but I think it might be valuable for you and potentially for other people. So if
Yeah,
you're
let's
good
do that in another episode, right? Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Well, I'd love for anybody else listening to this, put your comments below what questions you have. Like we just said, we're going to talk about how to do the hygiene exam in the middle of the day and how to use the headsets. We'll definitely talk about that. But, Dr. Wu, how can people find you, connect with you, learn more about you? We'll put stuff down below, but
Yep,
where
I'm
where
on
are you?
Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Wayofthewu. I'm also on LinkedIn, so connect with me there. And my office is Emerson Dental in Westford and Bedford. You can always contact my office as well. I'm an open book, so I'm here to help and here to, also not just help, but I'm here to learn. So if you have a better way to do something, I'd love to hear it.
Awesome. I love that. And that's what I love about you. I'm so excited that we're doing this series because you're very open, transparent, easy to talk to. I think that there's going to be a lot of dentists who will value listening to this. So thank you. And next time we'll jump into the hygiene part of things. We won't go clinical very much on this, but this will be a fun one. So thanks for joining again today.
Thank you.